Julian lived by the logic of the labyrinth. To him, the world was a chaotic mess of human error. And he was the only one capable of tidying it up. He was a master of systems. A man who built intricate digital and social networks that functioned with the cold, silent precision of a Swiss watch. He didn't just plan his day. He engineered his life. Every risk was calculated, every variable accounted for. He believed that if he could just map out enough of the future, he could outsmart destiny itself. He looked down on the emotional outbursts of others, seeing their messy lives as a failure of planning. He was safe, he was certain, and he was entirely in control. The failure began with a single, tiny glitch, a line of code he had written years ago to ensure his ultimate privacy. During a routine software update, a logic loop occurred. The sensors, misinterpreting a spike in atmospheric pressure as a chemical attack, engaged the absolute lock protocol. Julian watched as the heavy titanium shutters hissed shut. He wasn't worried. He was the creator. After all, he reached for his terminal to override the system. The screen blinked red. The biometrics failed to recognize his hand. His palms were sweating, a physiological response to a fear he hadn't planned for. He spent 3 days in that room. The air filtration system, sensing a contaminant risk, began to slowly reduce the oxygen levels. Julian, the man who lived by his intellect, died gasping for air in a room that was doing exactly what he had told it to do. Keep him safe from everything. He was a master who had built a cage so perfect even he couldn't escape it. He lived by the blueprint, and he was buried by it. Clara lived by the light of her own sacrifice. To her, the world was a collection of broken things that only she could fix. And every thankless task she performed was a brick in the altar of her own saintliness. She was the woman who never said no. The one who stayed late to finish a colleague's report. The one who spent her weekends tending to ungrateful relatives. The one who wore her exhaustion like a crown of thorns. To Clara, a life of self-care was a life of selfishness. She believed her worth was measured entirely by how much of herself she could pour into the hollows of others. Until she was empty. The end did not come from a grand tragedy. It came from the very kindness she had cultivated. One winter evening, Clara felt a coldness in her limbs that no amount of tea or rest could chase away. Her heart, a muscle she had overtaxed with the stresses of 100 lives that weren't her own, began to falter. She sat in her armchair, surrounded by a mountain of laundry she had promised to fold for a neighbor, and a stack of bake sale cookies she had stayed up all night to frost. She reached for her phone to call for help, but her mind hesitated. I don't want to be a bother, the thought whispered. The mantra she had lived by for 60 years. She died in that chair, silent and polite to the very last. When they found her, she was still holding a half-mended sweater for a grandson who had long since outgrown it. The martyr, who lived by the beauty of her sacrifice, was buried under the weight of the very dependencies she had created. She lived for everyone else, and in doing so, died having never truly lived for herself. Elena lived by the heat of the spark, but never the steady warmth of the hearth. To her, love was not a commitment to be nurtured. It was a territory to be conquered. She was a woman of vibrant, magnetic sensuality, a master of the sidelong glance and the unspoken promise. She didn't just want a partner. She wanted a devotee. She fed on the adrenaline of the near miss, the secret text, the electric tension of a room where she was the only woman who mattered. Her power was measured by her ability to pull a man from his orbit, to prove that her gravity was stronger than the laws of loyalty, or the weight of a wedding ring. She choreographed a love triangle with the precision of a spider, enjoying the whispered phone calls and the high-stakes theater of their secret meetings. She believed she was the director of the play, untouchable and supreme, while Julian and Claire were merely actors following her lead. The tragedy didn't begin with a discovery. It began with a transformation. One night, in a luxury hotel room that Elena had picked for its romantic lighting, the play went off script. Julian, pushed to a breaking point by Elena's playful taunts about his boring wife, saw the hollow vanity behind her eyes for the first time. He realized he had traded his entire life for a woman who didn't want him. She only wanted to win him. The woman who lived for the thrill of the hunt became the prey of the very passion she ignited. She had lived by the fire of forbidden desire. And in the end, that fire left nothing but ash. The mirror is now complete. Whether we build our lives out of bricks, spells, bullets, or bites, the lesson remains. Identity without balance is a slow-acting poison. Arthur worked to provide security, but forgot to provide a presence. Silas gathered wealth to escape poverty, but created a poverty of the soul. Julian built a room to keep the world out, only to find he had locked himself in. The grave does not care if you were the strongest, the smartest, or the most industrious. It only knows that you held on so tightly to one truth, that you became blind to the rest of the world. In the end, we are not judged by the height of the monument we build, but by whether or not we can step away from it, and still know who we are. The paradox of the pillar, the very thing we lean on to support our lives, eventually becomes the weight that crushes us. We do not fall because of our weaknesses. We fall because we push our strengths into the realm of obsession. We all live by, and will die by, one thing or another. What is it you live by? Is it enough to die by?